I stood there in our dimly lit dining room, the smell of herb-crusted salmon filling the air. My heart pounded with a mix of hope and dread. It was our 15th anniversary, and I'd spent the day preparing this dinner to remind Vanessa how much we still had together, how much I still loved her despite everything. Zoe was supposed to be part of this too. At 16, she was our only child still at home, though lately, she felt more like Vanessa's shadow than my daughter. I'd even bought a small gift, nothing flashy, just meaningful. My hand trembled as I set the tiny box on the table, wrapped in silver paper with a blue ribbon I'd tied myself. 5 years ago, life had felt like a dream. I can still see it, standing in our old house, making pancakes while Zoe giggled at the table. She was 11 then, all wide eyes and messy pigtails. Vanessa would come in, still in her silk pajamas, and wrap her arms around me from behind, kissing my neck like we were still newlyweds. Back then, I was somebody. Running my own tech firm, small but growing. I'd built Horizon Tech from scratch, late nights coding, early mornings pitching to clients. But then the deal went bad. One big project, a security platform for a major financial institution, and I'd sunk everything into it. When the client pulled out last minute, my firm took the hit. I sold the company for pennies, just enough to keep us afloat. Vanessa's warmth faded first. She stopped hugging me, stopped asking how my day was. Zoe started copying her. Why can't we have nice things anymore? They didn't see the hours I spent trying to rebuild. They saw the fancy life I'd given them before, and they loved that, not me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Vanessa coming home later than usual, her heels clicking past midnight. Her perfume lingered stronger some nights, a sharp citrus scent that wasn't the one I'd bought her. I'd catch Zoe texting nonstop, and if I walked in, she'd tilt her phone away, whispering like I was the enemy. Then I saw the message that cracked everything open. Vanessa had left her laptop open. Dinner at my place next time. Can't wait to see you again. Signed, Julian, her boss. I clicked on the thread, and it was all there. Months of messages, flirty at first, then outright planning, lunch tomorrow? Missed you last night. He doesn't suspect a thing. But I had a secret too. 2 years ago, my college friend Maya had come to me, begging me to invest in her AI startup. I'd written her a check for $50,000, most of my savings, without telling Vanessa. 3 months ago, Maya called out of the blue. Ethan, you won't believe this. We're going public. That 50 grand, it's worth something now. I'd been fixing a neighbor's computer for $20 and almost dropped the phone. Her company had taken off like a rocket. When they IPO'd, my shares shot up. I didn't tell anyone. I just kept reinvesting, watching the numbers climb while Vanessa and Zoe treated me like a loser. Last month, I'd cashed out enough to make me a multi-millionaire. I'd moved it into a new account, separate from the joint one Vanessa still used. That box on the table, it wasn't some cheap trinket. Inside was a folder, documentation for a new company I'd set up, a deed for a beachfront property, and a black credit card with no limit tied to my new fortune. The front door opened, and Vanessa walked in. She paused when she saw the table, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What's all this?" she asked, setting her designer bag down. "Happy anniversary," I said, my voice softer than intended. She glanced at the table, the candles, the gift, with something closer to annoyance than warmth. Zoe came downstairs, eyes glued to her phone. "Mom, can I go to Amber's tonight? Her parents are out of town," and she stopped when she saw me. "Oh, what's happening?" "Your dad made dinner," Vanessa said, making it sound like an inconvenience. "It's our anniversary." Zoe rolled her eyes. "Do I have to stay? Amber's waiting for me to text back." I felt something crack inside me. We ate in silence. Finally, I pushed the small silver box toward Vanessa. "This is for you," I said. "For us." She glanced at it, then sighed. "Ethan, you shouldn't have spent money on this. You know our situation." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Vanessa stood quickly. "I'll get it." When Julian walked in, tall and polished in his designer suit, I felt the room tilt. He slid an arm around Vanessa's waist right in front of me. She leaned into him, laughing, and he grabbed my wine glass and filled it from the bottle I'd bought. "Cheers," he said, raising it to me with a wink. I could have lunged at him, but I didn't. Something clicked instead, something cold and clear. I picked up the box, tucked it under my arm, and forced a smile. "All right," I said, my voice steady. "I'll go." Julian called after me, "Take care, Ethan," his tone dripping with fake pity, and I heard Vanessa laugh as I stepped outside. I sat in my car, staring at the house, our house, my house. I could still hear them inside, probably joking about how I'd slunk off. But I didn't go back in. I started the engine and drove away. That smile stayed on my face, not big, not loud, just there. They'd remember it later, when they realized what they'd lost. I woke up on Leo's old couch, the smell of coffee pulling me from restless sleep. My duffel bag sat in the corner, the silver box perched on top like a silent promise. Leo shuffled in, his gray hair sticking up, a mug in each hand. "Told you she was poison," he said, handing me the coffee. "Yeah, you did," I replied, voice scratchy. Sitting there with morning light creeping through the blinds, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake, really awake, for the first time in years. "What's the plan, kid?" he asked. "I'm building something," I said. "Something new." That day I got to work. I drove downtown, the box riding shotgun, and met with a realtor. Within hours, I'd leased an office space top floor, big windows, a view of the city that made my old life look small. I didn't blink at the price. The black card could handle it. Next, I called Maya. "Need an assistant," I told her. "Someone good, full-time." By the next day, I had Damon Young, sharp with a tablet, and a knack for keeping things moving. "What's the name?" he asked. "Ascend Ventures," I said. "A new line, a new start." We set up shop fast laptops, a desk, a phone line, and I pulled more cash from my account, the one Vanessa didn't know about. I started scouting startups, small outfits with big ideas and no capital. Vanessa and Zoe didn't cross my mind much those first few days. I was too busy. I was building in silence, brick by brick, and it felt damn good to be in control again. Then the notifications started showing up. The first came a week after the dinner, a text from the bank I'd pulled my name off the joint account. "Mr. Reed, your mortgage payment has been declined due to insufficient funds." I stared at the message, a slow smile creeping across my face. Not my problem anymore. A few days later, I got a call from the car dealership. "Hey, Ethan, your wife's lease on that Audi, it's in your name, and she missed the payment. We're repossessing it tomorrow." "Go ahead," I said. "I'm not paying it." The calls started soon after. "Vanessa first, you better help us, Ethan. This is your mess too." I didn't pick up. Then Zoe, her tone sharp but shaky. "Dad, what's going on? Mom's freaking out. Call me back." I didn't. The house, the car, the bills, they'd built their life on me, and now the foundation was gone. Word got around fast. A buddy texted me, "Saw Julian peel out of your driveway last night. Looked pissed." I wasn't surprised. Maya had done some digging. Turns out Julian's successful life was a house of cards, bad investments, a failing side hustle. He'd been leaning on Vanessa's stability, her house, her money, my money, to prop himself up. When the mortgage bounced and the car vanished, he bolted. Zoe started posting online vague, dramatic stuff like everything's falling apart. The kid who'd smirked at me was crumbling, and part of me felt a pang. She was still my daughter, but it faded fast. She'd chosen her side. The calls changed. Vanessa's voice softened, desperate. "Now please, Ethan, just talk to me." Then Zoe, quieter. "Dad, I'm sorry. Can you call me?" I let them stack up. They'd kicked me out, laughed me off, and now they were drowning. One night, I was on my office balcony when the phone rang. "Vanessa." Something made me pick up. Her voice came through, small and shaky. "Ethan, please don't hang up. I miss you. Can we meet?" I let the silence stretch, picturing her in that house, empty now, no car, no Julian, no money. "You threw away a diamond for costume jewelry," I said, my voice steady. She didn't say anything, just sniffled, and I hung up. 3 weeks after I walked out, I got an email from the bank. The house was in foreclosure. I read it while eating breakfast at my desk. I should have felt something, satisfaction, maybe, or regret, but all I felt was distance, like I was reading about strangers. That house had never really been home, just a place I'd paid for while they waited for something better. That night, alone in my new penthouse apartment, I finally opened the silver box. Inside was everything I'd planned to show Vanessa. I'd imagined her face when she saw them, the shock, the sudden realization of what she'd thrown away. But now they seemed smaller somehow, not less valuable but less important to who I was becoming. I put them back in the box and set it on a shelf. I didn't need their validation anymore. I was pushing a cart through the supermarket when I saw her. Zoe was standing by the discount bins, a package of ramen in her hand. She looked different, hair messy, her hoodie sagging off one shoulder. Her cart had a few cheap items: soap, bread, canned soup. "Dad," she whispered, the ramen slipping in her grip. I didn't say anything at first. Part of me wanted to walk away, but something held me back. "Hey," I said, my voice flat. Can we talk? She asked, her voice small. I nodded. Go ahead. Things are bad, Dad. Really bad. Mom's a mess. The house is gone. We're in some crappy apartment now. Julian left, and she just cries all the time. I listened, arms crossed. I could picture Vanessa unraveling without her perfect life, but I didn't feel the pull to fix it. I didn't know it'd get like this. I thought Mom was right, that you were holding us back. But now everything's falling apart. She looked up, eyes wet. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean it. All that stuff I said. I took a deep breath. I'd waited for this, hadn't I? For them to see what they'd done. But hearing it didn't feel like a win. It just felt heavy. You were a kid, I said, voice low but firm. You followed her lead. I get that. But you stood there, Zoe, while she kicked me out. You laughed with her. That's not something I can just forget. Her face crumpled, and she nodded. I know. I messed up. I miss you. Trust is a hard thing, I said. Once it's broken, it doesn't snap back together overnight. You hurt me, Zoe. Both of you did. I'm not saying never, but I'm not ready to pretend it didn't happen. She nodded again, tears spilling now, and I felt that old ache in my chest, the one that came from loving her even when she turned away. Okay, she whispered. I just wanted you to know. I didn't hug her, didn't promise anything. I just gave her a small nod and said, take care of yourself, before pushing my cart past her. By the time I reached checkout, I'd made a decision. I wasn't ready to let them back in, but I couldn't leave Zoe standing there like that either. I found her still in the same aisle, staring at a jar of pasta sauce. Zoe, I said, and she turned, surprise on her face. I held out a card, not the black one from my box, but a regular debit card I'd had Damon set up. There's $5,000 on this, I said. It's not tied to me, so your mom won't know where it came from if you don't tell her. It's not a lot, but it should help with rent and food for a while. She took the card with trembling fingers. Thank you. I nodded once, then walked away. In the car, I sat for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to sort through my emotions. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Thank you. I won't tell Mom where it came from. I didn't reply. The encounter had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Seeing her like that, vulnerable, scared, so different from the smirking teenager who dismissed me, had cracked something open inside me. The next morning, I woke to an email from Vanessa, subject line, please. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me click. Ethan, I don't know if you'll read this. I've tried calling, texting, everything. What I did was unforgivable. I threw away 15 years for something that wasn't even real. Julian left the moment things got hard. We lost the house. We're in a tiny apartment now, and Zoe's had to change schools. She's struggling. I'm struggling. I know that probably makes you happy, and you have every right to feel that way. But please, can we just talk? I was wrong. So wrong. About everything. About you. I didn't see what was right in front of me until it was gone. Please, Ethan. Just one conversation. Vanessa. I read it twice, then closed my laptop without replying. Her words should have brought satisfaction, but they just left me feeling hollow. At the office, I asked Damon to find out where they were living. 2 hours later, he came back with a folder. Got what you asked for. It's not pretty. Inside were photos of a rundown apartment building in a bad part of town. There was also a photo of Zoe walking into the building. She looked thin, tired, her shoulders hunched. I closed the folder, a knot in my stomach. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? For them to face the consequences of their choices. But seeing it didn't bring satisfaction. It just made me feel sick. That evening, I drove past their building. It was worse in person, peeling paint, broken windows, men loitering by the entrance. Back at the penthouse, I typed a response to Vanessa's email. The man you insulted is gone. The man you need now doesn't exist for you. I hit send, then blocked her email. It wasn't kind, but it was honest. I wasn't the same person who'd stood in that dining room, and I couldn't be the savior she was looking for now. As I was leaving the office that evening, Damon knocked on my door. Your daughter came by earlier. She was asking for you. My heart skipped. Zoe's here? What did she want? She wouldn't say, just that she needed to talk to you. She seemed pretty upset. He handed me a slip of paper with her number. I picked up my phone and dialed. She answered on the second ring. Dad? Damon said you came by. What's going on? There was a pause, then a shaky breath. Mom's in the hospital. She took some pills. They're saying she'll be okay, but I'm here alone, and I didn't know who else to call. The world seemed to tilt. Which hospital? I asked, already standing. Mercy General. 3rd floor. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I found her in the waiting room, curled up in a plastic chair. When she saw me, she stood, hesitant. Dad, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't think, just opened my arms, and she fell into them, shaking with sobs. I held her, this child who'd rejected me, and felt nothing but a fierce, protective love. It's okay, I murmured. I'm here now. She told me what happened. Vanessa had been spiraling for weeks. After my email, she'd gotten worse. Then Julian had shown up, not to reconcile but to demand money he claimed she owed him. She just broke, Zoe said, wiping her eyes. I found her on the bathroom floor. There was an empty pill bottle next to her. I listened, arm around her shoulders, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Guilt, yes, but also a strange detachment. The doctors say she'll recover, Zoe continued. But they want her to stay for psychiatric evaluation. And I can't go back to that apartment alone. It's not safe. You'll come home with me, I said. The decision made before I'd fully thought it through. Just until your mom's better. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Relief washed over her face, followed by uncertainty. Are you sure? After everything? You're my daughter, I said simply. That hasn't changed. I stood in the kitchen of my penthouse, the smell of coffee and pancakes filling the air. 1 year had passed since that night at the hospital, since I'd brought Zoe home with me. Now, watching her move around the kitchen with easy familiarity, I marveled at how much had changed. You're burning that one, she said, pointing to the pancake I was neglecting. It's not burnt, I defended. It's caramelized. She rolled her eyes, but there was no malice in it, just comfortable teasing. Whatever helps you sleep at night, Dad. Dad. The word had been awkward at first, tentative on her lips, like she wasn't sure she still had the right to use it. Now it flowed naturally, a bridge between who we'd been and who we were becoming. Those first weeks after Vanessa's hospitalization had been a delicate dance of boundaries and unspoken hurts. Zoe slept in my spare room, went to her new school, came home to a place where the lights worked and the neighborhood was safe. Vanessa had recovered physically, then moved to her sister's place in another state. She'd called once, asking to speak with Zoe, and I'd handed the phone over without comment. My relationship with Vanessa was over not with bitterness anymore, but with a quiet finality. Leo's coming for dinner tonight, right? Zoe asked. I nodded, and Maya, and probably Damon, though he claims he has other plans. He's just saying that so you'll insist, she said. He practically worships you. I laughed. He does not. He's just a good employee. We ate in comfortable silence. The city spread out below us. Ascend Ventures had grown beyond my expectations, funding startups that were changing their industries, making a name for itself for me in circles I'd once only dreamed of entering. But success tasted different now. It wasn't about proving something to Vanessa or Zoe or even to myself. It was about building something meaningful, something that would last. I got an email from Mom yesterday, Zoe said suddenly. She's doing better. Got a job at a marketing firm there. Nothing fancy, but she says it's a start. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. That's good. You don't have to pretend to care. I'm not pretending, I said, and realized it was true. I don't wish her ill. I just don't wish her anything at all anymore. She seemed to accept that. She asked about you. If you were seeing anyone. I nearly choked on my coffee. Why would she ask that? Zoe shrugged, a small smile playing at her mouth. Maybe because I mentioned Olivia in my last email. Ah, Olivia Winters. The unexpected variable in my carefully reconstructed life. I'd met her 6 months ago at a tech conference, where she was presenting research on sustainable energy solutions. Brilliant, direct, with a laugh that seemed to start somewhere deep inside her. We'd talked until the venue staff started stacking chairs around us, then continued over late-night diner coffee. I hadn't been looking for anything, was, in fact, actively avoiding any hint of romantic entanglement, but Olivia hadn't seemed to get that memo. Olivia and I are colleagues, I said, trying to sound firm. Zoe snorted. Colleagues don't bring you homemade soup when you have the flu. Or call just to tell you about a book they think you'd like. Or look at you the way she does when she thinks no one's watching. I felt heat creep up my neck. You're imagining things. And you're in denial. She stood, gathering her plate. It's okay to be happy, Dad. It's okay to let someone in. I watched her rinse her dishes, this child who'd somehow become wise beyond her years. I am happy, I said, and meant it. This you, the company, our life here, it's enough. She turned, leaning against the counter. Is it? Or are you just afraid of wanting more? I didn't have an answer for that. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was holding back out of fear. Not of getting hurt, I'd survived that already, but of disrupting the careful balance we'd achieved. I'll think about it, I conceded, and she grinned, knowing she'd won. Good. Because I invited her to dinner tonight too. That night, my penthouse filled with the people who mattered, Leo arguing with Maya about baseball, Damon helping Zoe with a college application, Olivia in the kitchen, making her grandmother's risotto despite my protests that she was a guest. Not a guest, she corrected. A friend. Friend's cook. I leaned against the counter, watching her. Is that what we are? Friends? She glanced up, her dark eyes meeting mine. For now. Unless you have a better suggestion. There was a challenge in her voice, a warmth that invited rather than demanded. I thought about Zoe's words, about letting someone in, about being afraid of wanting more. I might, I said, surprising myself, eventually. She smiled. I can work with eventually. After everyone had gone, I stood on the balcony, the night air cool against my face. Zoe joined me, wrapping a sweater around herself. Good night, huh? I nodded. The best. Told you Olivia should come. I laughed. Yes, you're very wise for someone who still can't remember to put gas in the car. Details, she said, waving dismissively. The important thing is I was right. We stood in comfortable silence for a while, the city humming below us. I've been thinking, she said finally. About what happened. With Mom, with Julian, with everything. I tensed slightly, old reflexes dying hard. For a long time I was so angry at her, Zoe continued. But lately I've been thinking maybe it wasn't all her fault. Not that what she did was okay, it wasn't. But maybe she was just lost, like we all were, in different ways. I considered this. Maybe. People do terrible things when they're scared or desperate or lost. It doesn't excuse it, but it might explain it. Do you think you'll ever forgive her? She asked, her voice small. I already have, I said, and realized it was true. Not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying the anger around was exhausting. She nodded. I think I'm getting there too. Not all the way, but getting there. After she'd gone to bed, I stayed on the balcony, thinking about forgiveness and second chances. A year ago, my heart had been full of anger and hurt. Now, the anger had faded, replaced by something quieter, more sustainable. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia made it moan. Thanks for tonight, it was perfect. I smiled, typing back, thank you for coming, and for the risotto, it really was better than mine. 3 dots, then I know. Sleep well, Ethan. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what might come. I was ready. The silver box sat on my shelf, a reminder not of what I'd lost, but of what I'd found: my worth, my voice, my strength. Not in silence, as I'd once thought, but in speaking my truth, in setting boundaries, in choosing who and what deserved a place in my life. The man they'd rejected was gone. But in his place stood someone better, someone who knew his value wasn't determined by others' validation. Someone who had learned, through pain and loss and rebuilding, that the most important approval was his own. And that was a lesson worth every step of the journey.